is some guy, Rob Russo, some leftist based in Canada. I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Two, hello. Not sure what that was. Not sure what that was. Did a little move there. Little jazz hands. Little jazz hands for you. I'm sorry, chat. I know I'm just starting. I'm late and everything, but I'm also making lunch at the same time. I'm making lunch simultaneously, and I can hear water spilling on the stove. One sec. Professional broadcaster, folks. That's right. And thank you, Lodane, for the raid. I hope that the Lodane stream was good today. Or Mass Effectin'. Mass Effectin' over there. Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't plan this out well at all. I'm already late getting started. I was getting late getting started, and I realized that I hadn't had lunch as well. And if I didn't eat something, then you'd have a cranky boy on your hands. And I know you don't want that, chat. I know you don't want that. You wouldn't want to have a cranky streamer on your hand, or hangry, or whatever. But I was late getting started. I was editing the podcast. I also got a contract to create some music for another podcast, so I was working on that. Late getting started, late getting ready, not eaten yet. I thought about just taking the day off. Maybe it's just not in the cards. I probably only have about 2 hours to stream. Maybe it's just not in the cards, but I was like, you know what? Sean Meat needs me. Sean Meat needs me. I can't just take a day off just because I don't have time or feel like I have anything interesting to talk about. Sean's counting on me. He needs me. He needs me to be there. And I take that shit seriously. I take that shit very seriously. New vlog dropped before I stopped streaming, so I'll be watching that tomorrow. Really enjoying the slow Mass Effect play. Hope everyone else is too, since we're injecting a bunch of chit-chat in between convos. That does sound very fun. That does sound fun. I gotta get back to Cyberpunk. I gotta get back to Cyberpunkin'. Rob would rather look bad in stream than look good and not stream. Rob swearing to chat will never be late again, and then King and Duck show up at his doorstep. No, but my pickup partner, King and Duck, are in town. We can take these guys. I had so much fun watching White Man Can't Jump with the chat and the community yesterday. So much fun. Like I was saying last night, it's such a fun way for me to experience movies that I've seen dozens of times. And I've seen White Man Can't Jump dozens of times. Many, many, many times. It was just one of those movies I had that, like, I saw it in theaters. I was talking about the personal experience that I had seeing it in the theaters in 1992 with my Pippi in Florida. Very uncomfortable, but also kind of fun. And I just had the VHS growing up, and it's just one of those movies that I would just watch and watch and watch and watch over and over and over again. And I've seen it so many times. And it's so cool for me to be able to watch those movies that I've seen so many times with people in the community that have never seen it before. I just had a big smile on my face the whole time. I just did a big grin on my face the entire time. I just get it just activates the dopamine receptors the whole time it's happening. I just love it. Hang on, let me finish my lunch and we can talk more about White Man Can't Jump. Just 1 minute. Just 1 minute. Okay? I'll just be once. Here, look, I'll put on the trailer to White Men Can't Jump if you want to watch that. The original, not the fucking remake. Not the remake, you kidding me?
Oh, it is hard work being this good. Oh, it hurts. Oh, it hurts. Oh, baby, give it up, turn it loose.
It's not about black.
I don't mean to brag, but I'm the greatest.
That's because you never saw me.
It's not about white.
Honey, I'm home.
How much money did you make today?
I missed you too.
I'm sorry, honey.
It's about green.
I want to find out how good you are, chump.
I'm your white shadow. I have a business proposal for you, as if you don't mind hustling.
What kind of hustle?
$500, baby, and you can pick my teammate.
Give him the chump.
You mean play basketball?
Hey, pretty boy, I got something for you. Shut your anorexic, malnutrition, tapeworm having, overdose, Dick Gregory, Bahamian diet drinking ass up. Give me my money. I see you hustle.
Hey, I've never used no goofy white mother.
Hey, who you calling goofy white mother? You goofy.
500 divided by 2. How much do you love me?
I love you, infinity.
Oh, Billy, you're so stupid. You should have said I love you infinity plus infinity.
We shoot you, Billy, but first we want the money. There are rules to hustling. There's an ethics involved.
Yeah, that you wouldn't know a damn thing about.
Will you explain to this Gladys Knight and the pimps?
It's Pips. The Pips.
Winning and losing is all one big organic globule.
I hate it when you talk like that. You got that big Z in your fro, man. What are you, the Black Zorro?
What are you doing?
I'm doing two things.
What?
I'm making them mad. Most guys don't play good when they're mad.
Look, you know you're embarrassing me. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing I'm doing.
I only have 4 words for you. White men can't jump.
I have a business proposal for you, as if you don't mind hustling.
What kind of hustle?
$500, baby, and you can pick my teammate.
Give him the chump.
You mean play basketball?
Gotta talk about White Men Can't Jump. Now, everybody knows, and it's funny, man, you talk about all your NBA accolades, college player of the year, all that good shit. There's such a crew now that just knows you from White Man Can't Jump, your iconic character, Raymond. You know, I'm gonna go to my car, get my other gun, shoot everybody's ass. But what's the story behind that character?
Okay, that's a good question. So Raymond is based on a story that you would hear.
What is
one
this?
Of the first
Who's
stories
this guy
you would
now?
hear as a new NBA player.
Who's this guy? The crazy story behind Marcus Johnson's White Man Can't Jump character. Oh, it's Raymond. Nice. We got Raymond.
The old veterans or somebody would tell you the story about a guy by the name of Reggie Harden. And Reggie Harden was just a basketball savant out of Detroit Eastern High School, won 3 straight city championships, 6'10", 6'11", handle, shoot. One of the greatest players to ever come out of Detroit. But Reggie had issues with heroin. He was a heroin addict. He got drafted by the Pistons. He never played college basketball. He was one of the first guys to go from high school to the NBA without playing college basketball. Had a chance to play for Tennessee, which is now Tennessee State, but Tennessee A&I back then, for a coach, Hal, I forget his last name, but he was one of the first guys drafted by the NBA. But he never played for him, and so he was a creature of the streets, east side of Detroit. Pimps and prostitutes and heroin addicts and heroin dealers and that whole thing. So Reggie was in the throes of his heroin addiction and
it's really raining here
throes of
right
his
now.
heroin addiction. And what Reggie would do, he would not only rob dope houses, heroin houses where he was buying drugs, he put on a mask, but he would also rob neighborhood bodegas or liquor stores or whatever. But he'd come in with that mask on at 7 feet tall.
We got some
and
rain.
with a gun and like give me
lots of rain right now.
Give me all your money. Like so one dude's like
The Total Recall remake is not good. No, it's not good. It's nowhere near. I mean, it's all right. It's fine. It's just the Total Recall remake is just taking the original and just stripping it of anything that made it like fun or interesting or different. You know, it's like competently done. Colin Farrell's a fine actor. You got Bryan Cranston in there as well. But it's just this bland, generic kind of sci-fi. And you lose everything about the original that makes it interesting and cool. Do we need to hear more about Raymond's character? I guess we don't. But as I was saying, and thanks everyone for bearing with me while I was getting started here. Again, I probably should have just taken the day off in retrospect. But you know what? I'm here. I'm here now. And yeah, I did have a fantastic time watching White Men Can't Jump with all of you last night. For those of you that weren't there or didn't make it, I do encourage you to please join the Discord server and check out the movie nights. I really enjoy those movie nights, folks. I really do. I'm happy we've been able to increase the schedule a little bit, because I really do every time have a fucking great time watching these flicks. A lot of them are movies that I've seen. A lot of it is the Rob canon, the formative movies for me. So we've watched a couple of movies I haven't seen. We watched Parasite a few weeks ago. But it's just very fun. It's very enjoyable. It's very enjoyable to watch those with you folks. And I was happy that people seem to be into White Men Can't Jump. Sometimes I second guess myself and I'm like, are people going to connect with this? Are people going to enjoy this? This film that I have been obsessed with since 1992 or whatever it is? It's not going to mean the same thing to them as it is to me. Maybe this is just a mediocre film that I've attributed some kind of personal meaning to. But I do genuinely think it's a very good movie. It's just, as I was saying last night, not to reiterate everything I was saying last night in the movie night, but everything about it's just a very simple, it's a flick about a couple of hustlers on the basketball court. But just everything about it, every aspect of the film was just done very, very competently. The cast is just incredible. Rosie Perez, the charisma and the chemistry of the cast just leaps off the screen. It's fun, it's funny, it's dramatic. There's that whole Long Night of the Soul for Billy Hoyle getting into the third act there, and it's brutal. It's like excruciating to watch. It's just shot and lit well and blocked well. The music is great. It's just a fucking great movie. It's awesome. And as I was saying yesterday, one of Stanley Kubrick's favorite films, White Men Can't Jump. And it's just fantastic. Shot well and blocked well. I wasn't even doing that intentionally. I was not even doing that on purpose. I was not even doing that on purpose. Anyway, I had a really good time. I had a huge, big, stupid grin on my face the entire time we were watching this movie. It's really coming down outside. If the stream gets cut off because I lose power. Of course, in Montreal, it's just kind of like it's like an electricity sometimes city now. So it's raining. So I guess it's possible that I might lose power. We'll see. I made a soup for lunch again. This is just like really the easiest and tastiest lunch to make when you're short on time. I was short on time. I made this like while just starting the stream and doing a bunch of other things. And it's very yummy. Very, very yummy. So once again, I don't totally know what we're doing. It is Xi Jinping's birthday. It's Xi Jinping's birthday today. president of China. Is he the president? Is he the prime minister? I don't even remember what the term is. Whatever he is, he's doing a fantastic job. He's doing a bang-up job right now. Nothing but respect for my president. I'll tell you that much. You know, we have all kinds of stories about Chinese interference in Canadian democracy. I would like for them to interfere more. Yeah, I thought I was president. I would like for them to interfere more. I think we would get a lot more done if they interfered even more. I would be totally happy with swapping out our current system with having him be the president of Canada as well. But I don't know if that's on the cards. It's not exactly a super popular position to have. Happy birthday, Mr. President, and congratulations on China's many accomplishments for which its people worked so hard. I mean, the amazing thing about China is that they're not even close to where they want to be. That's the exciting thing, I think, about watching China's development. They're like, what, are they halfway along their current kind of plan? Their current, you know, the idea of where they want to be by mid-century? They've still got a ways to go. You know, still a very poor country. We talk about all the development and the wealth that's been created and the economic growth and stuff. Still a very poor country overall. 1.3 billion people or whatever it is. So they're still nowhere near where they want to be. I think that's the really cool thing about China. You look at the development between 1949 and now, or even just 1980 and now, the end of the Mao period to the Deng Xiaoping period, and you look at the development, it's just like stunning. It's just incredible. It's historic. And then it's like, oh yeah, this is just they're just gonna continue. They're not finished. They haven't reached the end goal. Far from it. I think that's really cool. I'm willing to sacrifice the works of A.A. Milne for trains. Absolutely. I escaped from Canada. She made it. She made it, folks. Happy birthday to my president. Gemini, stay winning. Gemini season is just really unmatched, isn't it? Gemini season is really something special. They addressed extreme poverty, lifted millions out, then cracked their knuckles, lowered their visor like Ready Player One and say, now we're going to address the wealth inequality. I would actually like to look at that. I would like to look at that. This whole thing about, well, how do you support China? They're capitalists. Look at these Chinese billionaires. But it's like, there's fewer and fewer billionaires these days. Oh my goodness, did you hear that? There's fewer and fewer billionaires these days. Is that because their economy is in free fall and collapsing? I don't think so. I don't think so. It's because President Xi is pressing the socialism button. He has pressed, the socialism button has been pressed, folks. Ha. The socialism button has been pressed. Sir, a second socialism button has been pressed. One presses the big button with the hammer and sickle on it. Exactly. It's like the bat phone at the Commissioner Gordon's or whatever. Look at this. Are you paying attention? A couple of different stories. China's Xi Jinping sends warning signal to the wealthy as he opens new front in common prosperity push. Report to the 20th Party Congress signaled more robust regulation to narrow the wealth gap. Analysts expect a wider array of taxes to support poor families and bolster the social safety net, while wealthy Chinese could face a rocky road ahead. Why are Chinese billionaires $500 billion poorer than last year? This Chinese billionaire has lost over 90% of his fortune. China's the biggest loser of millionaires globally, report says. And I'm sure this is like, there's going to be an effort to spin this as to be like, oh, their collapse is imminent. Did I say, what was my Gemini pun? Gemini season unmatched. Jesus. I'm firing off the unintentional puns today. Meanwhile, I just got back from a work conference where every pre-stressed concrete tank manufacturer explained to me how they're in a cartel. Yeah. This is what I mean. It's like people say, like, how can you support China? They're not socialists. Look at these China. They use the capitalist mode of production. Look at all these Chinese billionaires and millionaires. You can't support that, can you? And at the same time, they're like, look at all these billionaires. They're losing all their billionaires. China's on the verge of collapse. Or like talking about the high-speed rail system. Don't you know it's not profitable? Don't they? You know they got these billionaires to subsidize that at a huge loss, and it's not even turning a profit for them. And it's like, why are we supposed to not like that? Why are we not supposed to be celebrating that? I don't know. No one can explain that to me. Having less billionaires is a bad thing. Yeah, exactly. Terrible. What a terrible crisis. Who can speculatively invest in private industry if there's no billionaires? If they don't profit, they're not going to want to spend their money there. And Professional Hog Groomer says, friend of the stream, Professional Hog Groomer says, after successfully eradicating extreme poverty by 2019, China's now turned its focus toward addressing wealth inequality. The speed, depth, and scale of this wealth redistribution is already sending a shockwave of panic through Western media. If China's prior efforts to reshape itself are any indication, it will be extraordinarily successful in this new effort to bring common prosperity to all. You see the share of extreme poverty, 1981 to 2019. And I mean, it's hard. People look at Deng Xiaoping and Dengism, and they say things like, he betrayed the revolution, not a socialist, not a communist, a revisionist, or whatever they say. And like, look at this. Like, look at 1981 to right now. And how can you look at that number and not say, hey, maybe some of these like economic decisions that were made during that period, maybe they had some merit. Look at that. You can literally see when the opening up of the economy started and the reform started. And then look at that. You see this dip right at the end of the 80s, the early 90s, right when the Soviet Union was collapsing. And then, lo and behold, China doesn't collapse. The Communist Party of China maintains its grip on power in China, weathers that storm of the late 80s and the early 90s and the collapse of the Soviet Union and all these Soviet states, keeps the socialists in charge, stays on the path of developing socialism with Chinese characteristics, and then look at the progress. And you see the poverty going down like that way, and you see the development and infrastructure going up like that. Pretty amazing. President Xi Jinping has called for stronger regulation of high incomes in the latest sign that a 10-month campaign targeting China's largest technology companies is rapidly expanding to encompass broader social goals. You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Dang stays winning.
Thank you, Dakadude, for 25 months tier 1. I appreciate that, Dakadude. Thank you. He does. Friend of the stream, Deng Xiaoping. State media reported that a meeting of the Chinese Communist Party's Central Financial and Economic Affairs Commission on Tuesday, chaired by Xi, had emphasized the need to regulate excessively high incomes and encourage high-income groups and enterprises to return more to society. You see things like this in DPRK as well, but they've got less capital to work with, obviously. The committee added that while the party had allowed some people and regions to get rich first in the early decades of China's reform and opening period, it was now prioritizing common prosperity for all. worth critiquing, but filthy revisionist has always struck as a weirdly odd-sounding label. Well, especially coming from Western socialists. That's the thing that I always scoff at. Western socialists describing either the Soviet Union or China or Deng Xiaoping or whoever as being not socialist enough or revisionist or any of these things. And it's like, what have you done? What have you built? Where's your revolution? Where's that? What have you organized? You know? You have a revolution here in Canada or the United States, and then we can maybe critique other socialist projects. Until then, no investigation, no right to speak. How about that? No investigation, no right to speak. If you're just going to regurgitate a bunch of shit from Radio Free Asia or AUKUS or whatever it is, or find some ultra-leftist position or analysis or framework with which you can criticize this, but from this left-wing perspective, come on, just give me a break. I can't stand that shit. I've organized some very successful potlucks. No investigation, no right to speak. Forgot I opened this. We need to get all the influence of these horrible Chinese people out of our politics. I think me and my friend from CSIS agrees. Maybe you should have the head of CSIS on the show to talk you through it. Exactly. That's what counts as journalism in this country. Oh, it's good. That's very good stuff. You know, we've been putting off watching that breakthrough news video about this. So let's do that. I talked a lot yesterday. I talked for like 3 straight hours yesterday, which was fun. I really enjoyed the discussion and the conversation yesterday. I would maybe like to not talk quite as much today. So I think it would be a good opportunity to watch this breakthrough news video with Ken Hammond and about China's quest for a socialist future. And we can even make the title even more specific. Let's do this, and I will continue working on getting Ken Hammond on this program.
We need a new system. We need a city. The Chinese government and its ruling Communist Party says that China is not only growing economically, but that it is building socialism with Chinese characteristics.
And it's kind of chauvinist as well when China or whoever it is, whatever actually existing socialist society says, you know what we're doing right now? We're led by the Communist Party here. We're a bunch of communists. We have learned from, Engels, Marx, Lenin, and other great socialist thinkers, and we're building socialism right now. That's what we're doing. And then you have these like arrogant, chauvinistic people in the West being like, I think you're lying. And it's Orientalist as well. Like it's kind of a fucked up position to take. No, I think you're lying about that. Not only are you doing socialism wrong, but you're not being honest. You're lying about being socialist. Like, are you kidding me? It's so arrogant. It's so arrogant to take this position.
Today, we're going to talk about exactly what the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party mean by socialism with Chinese characteristics. Welcome to this week's episode of The Real Story on the Socialist Program. I'm your host, Brian Becker. Today, we're talking once again with Dr. Ken Hammond. Dr. Hammond is a professor of East Asian and Global History at New Mexico State University. He was the founding director of the Confucius Institute at the university. He's an organizer with the peace organization Pivot to Peace. And very importantly, he is also the author of a brand new book, China's Revolution and the Quest for a Socialist Future, which was just released this week. You can find it at 1804books.com. Dr.
I'm
Hammond,
copy of
welcome
this.
back.
Glad to be here, Brian.
Well, I'm so happy about this book. It's been a project that you've been working on for some time. I've been working in some ways with you on it. I have the introduction. Eugene Perrier also has a reflection in the book, but you are the author of the principal text here. Let's just talk first about the title. And again, I'll hold the book up so people can see it. We may have some other footage of it. It's China's Revolution, the Quest for a Socialist Future. Why the title?
Well, I think that, the title tries to make the point that what is going on in China is an ongoing process, that China, under the leadership of the Communist Party for the last 73 years or so, has been working towards the goal of building a socialist society, a socialist economy, and of course, eventually moving towards the ideal of communism. But that this remains a work in progress, that there have been ups and downs, there have been changes in policies along the way.
No, do it now.
The process has gone through a considerable, somewhat long and winding road, if you will. But it's very clear at this point in time that under the leadership of Xi Jinping and the broader leadership of the party and the state, that China is very serious about this effort. Whether that will, in the end, be a successful endeavor, I think to some extent remains to be seen. China is charting a new course. It is experimenting. It is advancing on many fronts, but it faces challenges. And I think that what we want to do is try to have a realistic understanding of the project and the objective and the efforts that are being made, without simply saying that it's a done deal, that the revolution's over and everything is hunky dory. So it's really, the book itself is a snapshot in some ways. It has a long historical background, but it also tries to present the situation as we have it now in the 2020s, in the hopes that we'll be able to return to this topic in another 10 or 15 years and see how the story has developed then.
Well, the approach in the book is something that I think is important for people who read the book to understand, that you and Eugene Perrier, myself who wrote the introduction, we're using a method of historical materialism as we understand historical materialism. In other words, Marxism and the Marxist method to examine China and its evolution before the revolution, during the period of the Revolutionary War, then the first stages of socialism under the leadership of Mao, Chairman Mao. After the passing of Chairman Mao, the ascension of a new leadership, Deng Xiaoping, and the very profound economic changes that took place in China under the banner of opening up. And then the many trials and tribulations of this process, including the ascension then of a new leadership, Xi Jinping, who took office 10 years ago, but who has another 5 years to go now. So his leadership could extend, up until 2028. Using historical materialism, we try to understand
worldly manga does seem
China
like they're doing
based
something
on
right.
an investigation of what is actually happening, rather than a preconceived notion whereby we either put China up on a pedestal, idealize China, said China is heaven on earth. We avoided that. And at the same time, unlike some on the left who denounced China, either before the opening up reforms or after the opening up reforms, and some of the people who denounced China's project of opening up to foreign corporations in a private market, they also denounced China when it had a command-type economy under Chairman Mao. Maybe it wasn't exactly a command-type economy, but certainly before the opening up. There was just generally animus and hostility towards China from some Marxists, some social democrats, many social democrats, and of course the imperialists and
What do you know? The
apologists for
social
capitalism.
democrats were against
We use
it.
this method, and you use this method of historical materialism. And using that method, and I'm going to go over for the audience what the different chapters are, because they're really, really instructive. But I want to start big picture with you.
It's really amazing, like the concept of historical materialism really does, like when you start to grasp this understanding of history or society or progress, and you can start to look through things through that lens, it really is this like skeleton key almost that unlocks so much, that makes so many things that were confusing prior to that really slide into place and start to make sense. It's the true red pill. It's the true red pill. People talk about the red pill, these right-wing guys being like, thinking that feminism is like, when their moms tried to make them take medicine and they didn't want to, or something like that. And they think the red pill is understanding that. The true red pill, though, is dialectical materialism, which does, it's like you become Neo and you can see the code. You don't even see the people anymore. You use the code. You can just all of a sudden understand these things that seemed so confusing and contradictory and alienating. It's really has been a hugely valuable tool to me to try and wrap my mind around some of these concepts. And you know who the socialist leader was that did the most to advance this concept of historical and dialectical materialism? Who was that again? I'm trying to remember. It was one of the really famous ones. I guess it's not that important, but whoever it was must have been a pretty smart guy, pretty smart cookie, if you ask me.
Chinese
Hang on, I'm gonna set up
socialism with Chinese characteristics.
Sorry, I'm going to set up my fan. Moss. I'm going to set up my fan here because it's not only is it pouring rain right now, but it's very now hot and humid. You can probably see me starting to sweat here. I can feel the sweats, and I just drank a spicy soup on top of it. So I'm kind of really starting to sweat up a storm here. I'm going to go grab my fan. Then maybe finally I can sit down for longer than 5 minutes.
For some people, it sounded like just a slogan, just a camouflage of what China's real attempts were after the death of Mao and the opening up. But you make the case in this book that China, socialism with Chinese characteristics didn't start in 1978. It started 100 years ago when the communist movement in China began. Let's talk about your view on that.
Well, I think that what's important about the concept of socialism with Chinese characteristics, and that phrase with Chinese characteristics gets applied in a number of contexts, is that this is the concrete application of Marxist theory, of Marxist-Leninist experience and practice and theoretical insights. Just as you say, we tried to take a historical materialist approach in putting this book together. I think that when we look at the actual experience, the historical reality of Chinese history, the
having a stream, or having a steam,
the establishment of the People's Republic, and the events that have unfolded over these last 73 or so years, that we need, again, as the Chinese say, we need to seek truth from facts. And it isn't a matter,
that's nice.
It can't just be a matter that there's this historical theoretical model, an abstraction, a kind of blueprint or template that we just apply to any place around the world. And we say, well, here's how we make the revolution. Here's how development can take place. And if it follows this exact model, then that's good. And if it deviates from this in some way, then that's bad. I think that's not a very productive way to approach actually existing life and struggle. And I think that's a very important thing. It's a really substantial thing to try to understand about modern Chinese history, that what we have is an effort to liberate the Chinese people, to have the Chinese people liberate themselves from imperialist exploitation and from exploitation by economic elites within their own society. China had a long history of its own distinctive version of sort of commercial capitalism. It had a very highly commercialized, monetized commodity production economy for almost 1,000 years before Western imperialism arrived in the 19th century, undermined that, forced China to open itself to economic penetration, and really hollowed out that traditional economy. But it didn't disappear. And so that means that when we look at the nature of China in terms of making revolution, we have to understand it in its own realities. And this is what Mao Zedong was able to do. When the Communist Party is first formed in China, it's under the influence of European Marxism. It's under the influence of the Communist International based out of Moscow. And
we need a new Communist
really
International.
Was a tendency to view China through a kind of lens that was really ground, if you will.
I would actually love China to launch a new Communist International, which would actually be very cool and exciting if that ever did happen. But how many democracy points do they have? That's right. The Institute for the Henry Kissinger Institute for Democracy Studies has determined that it's very low on the democracy scale. So unfortunately can't support it.
Early 20s, there was this effort to build a united front with the nationalists. The nationalists were seen as sort of the national bourgeois party, and it was felt that there was not a sufficient industrial working class base for a separate communist revolution. But what Mao argued, based on his work in Hunan province with farmers' unions and things like that, was that understanding the Chinese rural economy as a commercial economy, as an economy in which agricultural labor was exploited for profit, meant that it was possible to conceptualize the peasantry in China as agricultural proletarians. And that's the foundation upon which he argued for a revolutionary struggle, and that eventually led to, of course, the victory of the revolution in 1949. And that sets the stage for China's also very distinctive process of the initial stages of socialist construction, the period of what we call new democracy, where they didn't just simply arbitrarily expropriate all businesses because they knew that there were patriotic capitalists, there were people who were in business, but they were supportive of the effort to build a new China, to free China from imperialist domination. And so it was a sort of incremental process through the 50s, both in the industrial and in the agricultural sectors, of trying to advance along a socialist road. And there's a lot of particular points along that path that we can talk about in terms of adapting what the phrase they use is adapting the universal truths of Marxism-Leninism to the particular conditions, the specific material conditions of China. And that's a dialectical process, which is exactly what it should be. But there's been a tendency, as you've suggested, amongst some folks on the left and certainly in more mainstream circles, to have this kind of idealized version of a revolution and a socialist path that doesn't necessarily fit the exact conditions that the Chinese people had to work with and that the Communist Party and the leadership had to work with. So when we talk about socialism with Chinese characteristics, that's really what we're talking about. This isn't just something that began with Deng Xiaoping in the 1980s, but it's something that has been integral to the process of revolutionary struggle and socialist
I like the pizza analogy,
in China right from the start.
I want to help our audience also frame this discussion because it's a really important set of debates and controversies within the left. And I think your book really has gone a long way to help clarify.
Imagine
it.
Not thinking that China was cool.
After the death of Chairman Mao and basically
could not be me.
The liquidation of a grouping called the Gang of Four, but that included Mao's wife, not liquidated physically, but they were arrested. There was a big purge. And 2 years later, Deng Xiaoping, who had been a longtime leader of the Communist Party, at sometimes a close colleague and comrade in arms with Mao and sometimes a political opponent within the Communist Party leadership, he comes to power and then announces the opening up, allowing foreign Western corporations, capitalist corporations, to do foreign direct investment, allowing private businesses to grow inside of China, having a hybrid economy, mixed economy, partly a private market, partly a state-run enterprises, with a very strong state intervention from the point of view of credit in the banks. So there's this directing hand of the state. But nonetheless, it was obviously a change in policy from that was pursued by the Communist Party during Mao's lifetime.
If people want a good glimpse of what life was like before and during the revolution, I've been reading a book called Fen Shen, a Western journalist live amongst the people in a small village and wrote a pretty massive book documenting it firsthand. That sounds fascinating, Old Dutch. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts once you finish that. That sounds really interesting.
And at that time, or after that time, a great number of people who were pro-Mao, supporters of Mao, very inspired by Mao, inspired, say, by the Cultural Revolution, the attempts to overcome bureaucracy, et cetera, they lost all faith in the socialist project in China. They said, well, China is on the road to capitalist restoration, or it's already been achieved. It's over. The revolution is dead. The Soviet Union is dying, or it was already dead. Now China is dead. I worked on a book called China, Revolution, Counter-Revolution, that was published in 2008. It was a literary and political project initiated by people inside the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And the argument that we made, which was really not to a wide audience, it was to a limited left audience, is that those people who were counting out the Chinese Revolution, insisting that it was dead, that it was a dead letter, and that socialism with Chinese characteristics was just a camouflage for what was, in essence, capitalist restoration, that they were making a big mistake, because the essence of our argument was, as long as the Communist Party of China retains state power, it can move this way, it can move that way, it can move to the left, it can move to the right, it can privatize, but it can also unprivatize, it can socialize, it can nationalize.
Press the
And
socialism
here we
button.
are 15 years later, and your book goes over this in great detail. The Chinese Communist Party has made many moves in one direction or another and adjustments as time goes on. But what's happening under the Xi Jinping leadership is a reaffirmation that the goal
That
is
sounds nice,
socialism.
Jay.
And thus the title in your book, the goal of socialism isn't a dead letter. It's very much a part of the thinking, the doctrine, the political orientation, the agitation, the political sort of orientation of the Communist Party. And it's not a charade, it's for real.
I mean, again, we don't want to put all our hopes and dreams in China. We don't want to fetishize, or like Brian was saying, pretend that it's heaven on earth, or pretending that everything's perfect, or that mistakes haven't been made, or that there's not contradictions or anything. You know, things that maybe could have been different. Obviously, there are problems during the Cultural Revolution. It was not a perfect process. The Chinese people are very open and honest about that. There were problems with the opening up of China and the Deng era as well. Big foreign policy blunders and being part of the Vietnam, supporting the Vietnam invasion, supporting Pol Pot and stuff. There have been mistakes. There's been contradictions. There's been, you can have these arguments. We shouldn't fetishize, It's called a struggle for a reason. That's a good point. But just this idea, though, if you're on the left, if you live in the West here and you call yourself like a socialist or whatever, and if you really don't think, if you think socialism is not happening in China and it's just like in name only, I just feel like that's got to be such a bleak and hopeless existence. Because if that's what you believe, then you've basically accepted that, there's no more Soviet Union. Chinese socialism is dead. We don't really have hope of building socialism here. Maybe you might think they might at some point, but we're way behind the 8 ball with all these massive crises coming up or currently visiting us, economic crises and political crises, and the climate crisis. If I really thought that just socialism was just a dead project internationally like that, that's got to be such a bleak and depressing and cynical worldview. Again, we don't want to fetishize or think everything's perfect, but that's something that I think is so exciting. This level of development that we were talking about, the reduction in extreme poverty, the reduction in wealth inequality, the Belt and Road Initiative, developing these global South countries and making them better deals than what they're getting from the IMF, BRICS, and these alternate economic institutions that are coming up. That's being led by a socialist country. Even though you live in the West, you can think that we're losing. And yeah, if you're a socialist in the West, you don't have a lot to hang your hat on in terms of big victories anytime over the last couple of decades. But we're living through the emergence, as we've talked about a lot on the show. This has been the main thing we've talked about on this show. We're living through the emergence of this brand new competing global order, this new economic and cultural and political order that's rising right in front of our eyes. It's happening right now. And it's being led by, not exclusively with socialist countries, but it's being led by a socialist country of 1.3 billion people. A socialist country that's led by a communist party that has 90 million members. There's emerging global superpower, the largest economy in the world. That's being led by a socialist country. That's exciting. That's something that should fill you with hope and inspire you. And it's an antidote to doomerism, and it's an antidote to that cynicism. And if you didn't believe in that, I just feel like, what would be the point even? What would be the point of any of this? It's like, I just can't, just couldn't be me. That's all. It just couldn't be me. And that's one of the things that I've tried to do on this program, is get people to maybe accept the idea that this is actually a really positive, incredible thing that we're seeing happen right in front of our eyes right now. And there's so many people in our society, even I feel like I'm kind of in the minority for having some of these views, but there's so many people in our society that are progressive-minded people or left-wing people or whatever, and they're missing this amazing thing. They're completely missing this amazing thing that's happening. that could be inspiring them and filling with hope, and they're just totally missing it. Or they're looking at it happening, they're not missing it, and they're like, this is bad to me. You know? So they're either completely ignoring it, completely missing it, or this thing that's personally, for me, fills me with optimism about the future. They think that it's a bad thing. And it's just, I don't get that. I really don't. What is this, Jay? That's not a real picture, is it? Yeah, just a brief. That's got to be photoshopped or something. Like it's Glinner's official picture. It's from the official Glinner account. He doesn't look like that though, does he? Like there's so many things wrong with this image. This doesn't look like real. This looks like an AI image. This looks like it was made by AI. He looks like there's that like I know big head. I have a huge head. But I mean this is like something else. This is like big head mode on NBA Jam though. And just nothing about this makes sense. It's like an MC Escher painting. He looks like a character from a David Cronenberg movie. And who's weird fascist is he hanging out with? What do you know? A guy with a Ukraine flag. Anyway. Not good.
Very much so. I think that, I went through those same things, when Mao died and the Gang of Four were arrested, and there were a couple of years of internal conversations, shall we say, within the party in China, and then Deng Xiaoping's emergence and getting launched on the path of reform and opening. And I first moved to China in 1982 when the reforms were really just cranking up, and lived there for the next few years, watching things change around me. That was a period where I think many people were, to some extent, legitimately concerned about where China was going, what was going to be the direction. And I think it has taken time to see that while this was a big change, and it was a kind of a great adventure, if you will, certainly a great experiment, that it was undertaken with a consciousness and awareness that it was a fraught path, that this was something that wasn't going to be simple. This wasn't just going to be, let's flip a light switch and now we can have socialism. That the process of building a socialist future, building a socialist economy and society was something that was going to require not a few months, not a few years, maybe not even a few decades, but a very long period of time. And I think that when China
seriously, it
embarked
maltates
upon the path of reform,
absolutely.
It was
Glinner
it was
is just
understood.
it's just a depressing character for sure. And I don't feel sympathy for him because everything that's happened to him is completely of his own making. And because he's gotten so twisted up in this like hate movement, essentially. But it really is incredible. And you see the TRRS mind virus like all across the UK. But the way that, like, I won't think of Glinner for like 9 months or a year or whatever it is. I'll see some horrible thing that he did, and I'll just say like, oh, what a piece of shit. And I'll just kind of move on with my life. And then like 9 months later, I'll see another Glinner shitty thing that he did. And I'll be like, oh, I hate that guy. But then it'll occur to me, I'll like look at his timeline for a moment, and you realize that every single one of those days that I wasn't thinking about this guy existing or I was doing my own thing, he was on Twitter for 8 to 10 hours a day, tweeting about only this every single day. And it's the only thing that he thinks about. It's the only thing that he talks about. It's just horrible. Like, you're right. It's like, and again, I don't feel sympathy for him, but it really is like fucking weird and sad, you know? Seriously. Did you see the AP update? Yeah, I did see that as well. I mean, you see the way that like Washington Post and the New York Times and the AP, etc., they're trying to carve out this kind of centrist position between, obviously, kids need gender-affirming care and blah, blah, blah. It has this positive effect on kids and other trans people experiencing gender dysphoria. And, you know, trying to acknowledge the existence of trans people and kind of trying to have cursory support for the trans community, while also being like, but there are legitimate critiques of, and naming all the controversies and all the things that have been held up over the last year or two as being these big crises, the puberty blockers and these kind of and women in sports and these kinds of like controversial things. So they're trying to carve out, mainstream liberal media in America is trying to carve out this centrist position between supposedly supporting trans people on one hand, and then acknowledging and kind of encouraging these kind of trans panic controversies at the same time. So now is just as important as ever that we need to continue to stand with trans people and the LGBTQIA plus community, even if these movements and these pride parades and whatever are getting co-opted by banks and weapons manufacturers and big corporations. That doesn't mean we should just be abandoning this community while this panic is spreading in our society, in our culture. Some people find that really tricky, I guess. The truth must lie somewhere in the center. The people who want rights and the people who want the right to hurt the people who want rights. Exactly. We just need to find some kind of common ground or compromise.
There would be contradictions that would be generated by this, that there would be problems of corruption, of inequality. I think that maybe the degree to which environmental issues have been generated might not have been appreciated initially, but certainly they became aware of that and understood that. But the sense was that if this process could be managed with the party and the dedication to socialism, with the socialist mission always in mind, always as the guiding power, then it was a risk worth taking. And it was possible that this could be a mechanism for building the economy, for enhancing the livelihoods of the Chinese people, raising material standards of living, longevity, lowering infant mortality, educational opportunity, healthcare, housing, all of these things, that these could be accomplished. And what we've seen is that on a very material level, that has been a phenomenally successful endeavor. But it also generated contradictions, as we say, including the emergence of bourgeois elements. There is private capital in China, and there's no question that private capital seeks to, maximize its own advantage. That's something that has to be managed and kept in the forefront, and that's why the continued leadership of the party is absolutely vital and essential. Because without that, when there's no guiding hand, when there's no guiding force, when there's no overarching commitment to a future of justice and equality and equitable distribution of the fruits of labor to those who produce them. If that vision, if that commitment goes away, then you get capitalist restoration, then you get, taking the capitalist road. But that is not what has happened. And we see that in many, many instances. We see it in the ability of China to navigate its way through financial crises and economic crises that in other countries were devastating for working people. But China, because it has a socialist core and maintains its socialist legality and maintains the leadership of the party, is able to navigate those things. It navigated the global crisis in 2008 to 9. It reoriented some of its economic policies. It had an infrastructure that provided not just safety nets, but real material support for the 20 million or more workers who lost their jobs because of the collapse of consumer demand in the West. So, we see that. We see how China coped with COVID, literally saving millions of lives by mobilizing the resources of the state, the party, and the people in a national endeavor to deal with a crisis, which in capitalist economies simply was a source of profit, and in America, over.
And we probably could have eradicated COVID entirely if Canada and the United States and the capitalist countries had done our fucking jobs. They were trying to maintain COVID zero. There was an opportunity to completely wipe out this virus, but of course, because our decaying society is so hardwired into this eternal growth, constant shopping, and personal liberty obsession, we couldn't do what needed to be done. And they held out for as long as they could, and unfortunately, it just wasn't able to. they just can maintain this COVID zero society precisely because the entire rest of the world has been completely abdicating the responsibility.
The reality of China's commitment to socialism.
They lost a lot of democracy points there.
21st century crises, and I think that's one of the points that we're trying to make in the book, because I think that speaks to what the overarching truth of the situation really is.
Yeah, one of the things that I'd like to talk to you about is that there is the economic sort of structure of society, how the means of production are organized, how goods are manufactured, or certainly how they're distributed. So there's the economic structure, the economic foundation. And then there's the issue of superstructure, and especially, even though it includes many elements in superstructure, culture, education, et cetera, government and governance is certainly a key part of it. And so we have different economic structures, a different economic structure in China than we do, say, in the United States or in the Western capitalist countries, and a very different form of governance. And I was just thinking, Ken, as I was getting ready to interview you, the big headlines in the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, is that there might be a deadlock between Kevin McCarthy leading the Republicans in the House and the Biden administration over the debt ceiling. Now, the debt ceiling is a completely artificially created metric that the U.S. government has a certain level of debt in order to finance its operations. And so there's a debt ceiling which has been arbitrarily determined by the government. So the government and both parties have spent weeks and actually a couple months now debating over whether or not to lift the debt ceiling, this arbitrary artificial metric, for whether the U.S. government can borrow more. And obviously it will borrow more, because otherwise it will sort of default on all of its obligations and there will be a major economic catastrophe. But days, weeks, months of discussion, and they've accomplished nothing in terms of actually doing something for the country. And then you think about what was it like when Trump was president. There was 2 impeachments, endless investigations. And then when Biden came in, more investigations by the Republicans, who are now the party out of office. Meanwhile, no high-speed trains are being built, 70,000 bridges in need of repair.
Not doing shit.
About 1 million people are going to lose health care coverage because COVID emergency funds are ending now. The Chinese government doesn't have these kind of problems. It would seem to me, even though the U.S. says, we are the great democracy, follow our lead, it's such an embarrassment in terms of a non-functional or dysfunctional government compared to China. You're there. You're not there right now, but you've been in China for a long time. Let's just talk about the difference in the form of governance between these two systems.
It's called having a democracy versus not having a democracy.
Again, that's part of this overall concept of thinking about things with Chinese characteristics. That China's a different place. It's modern Chinese civilization is the result of literally thousands of years of development, and so when the revolution
long before Canada or the United States have existed, by the way,
it isn't like all of a sudden modern China, China under the Communist Party, the People's Republic of China, is somehow suddenly going to be a replica of Western political thought or Western political institutions, organizations, all that kind of stuff. The revolution in China is made in China. It's made by Chinese people who have lived their lives within a particular cultural matrix, and that we understand as Marxists that
this
matrix
guy's so
is
cool.
determined,
God damn him.
Is shaped by the
I really enjoy hearing him talk about this
in
stuff.
which people live. We understand that this whole, as you say, the relation of base and superstructure. But
you can count on me.
That,
and have
we
good
have
old
to understand
Rob
that
to talk you through all this.
Mobile Newman, thank you for the 22 months of Tier 1. Thank you, Mobile Newman. Heck yeah.
In an actual living way. And so, of course, the revolution in China, the revolutionary state, the political system, the thought processes that go on, they are distinctive. They are Chinese. And we can't, of course, this is difficult for the American bourgeoisie because they think everybody in the world wants to be Americans and just do what America says. But even for people on the left, it seems that it's very difficult for them to enter into the idea of dealing with China, of trying to understand China and see China in its own terms. And of course, this doesn't just apply to China. This is true with revolutionary struggles and political developments in countries all over the world. Every place needs to be understood and taken seriously within its own parameters, which doesn't throw out when we talk about the universal truths of Marxism-Leninism, that's not about, as I said before, that's not about a template or a blueprint. That's about a methodology. That's about an analytical approach. That's a way of trying to understand exactly what those specific distinctive conditions are, exactly how the insights of Marxism and of historical materialism can be used to find a path towards this more just and equitable world of socialism and eventually communism. That's a real life practice that isn't just sketching something out and wiring up a schematic or something like that. So I think that's when we think about the Chinese legal system, when we think about the Chinese political system, yes, it's very different. They talk about something they call whole process democracy. Now, there are elections in China. There's elections at the local level, at the municipal level, at the provincial level, national level for things like the National People's Congress, and of course within the Communist Party, which has around 100 million members. It's as big as many countries in the world.
There's only one party.
When the National Party.
There's only one party. No. It's only democratic when you have like at least two parties. You know, if the Chinese Communist Party just split into two different factions, maybe people would like calm down about that kind of stuff in the West, you know? And it was like the NWO or something. You had the black and white and the red and black. And then we'd be like, there you go, two parties. There you go. Both representing ultimately the same class interests with maybe some slightly different tweaks about how they want to go about advancing this goal. Are you happy? Are you happy? You got multiple parties now. Like, who fucking cares?
Congress takes place. Those are elected.
We have one party now.
Come up through a
if you live in the United States, there's one party. If you live in Canada, there's one party. Okay, it's the Capitalist Party. They're led by the Communist Party. We're led by the Capitalist Party. This one party, this single party authoritarian dictatorship has a few different ideological wings and different factions. And we can go vote for, depending on where we live, a different millionaire landlord to go and serve our interests in Parliament or in Congress or the Senate or whatever. And we choose from a couple of different multimillionaire landlords to go and get the job done. You know? And I know there's other parties as well. You know, that's our election system. That's our amazing Western liberal democracy. We choose from one of the factions of the Capitalist Party, the single party bourgeois authoritarian dictatorship that we live under. And then we can choose which millionaire landlord goes to represent these interests in Ottawa or in Washington or London or wherever. And that's our beautiful democracy that we love to lecture everyone around the world about. Neither of these parties can like do things. They can't build anything. They can't build infrastructure. They can't protect people. They can't have a functional healthcare system. They can't do anything. But we get to choose from the different factions, though. We get to choose which multimillionaire landlord does nothing. And often take their public salaries that they get from, being a elected representative and go on to become even bigger multimillionaires and have these big palatial estates. That's our incredible democracy.
Hierarchical system of sort of nested elections. So we have electoral mechanisms.
Ridiculous.
In China, but they don't operate.
And yet you have a cell phone. Curious. Well, where is the cell phone made, though?
Political parties in the West do, and in many ways they're kind of secondary.
Where was the cell phone made?
Real dynamics of political process in China, which is an always open process of consultation, the solicitation of input, both through the mechanisms of the party, but also through the state, through the media, through things like the internet now. It's absolutely critical. And there's been a lot of discussion actually in party circles recently in China about how absolutely critical it is to stay in touch with the masses, to stay in touch with the people, to be attuned to what their needs are, what their hopes and dreams and desires are.
Imagine having that as your political representation.
Something where people walk into
we're tuned into what the needs of the masses are. the needs of the people.
Pull a lever or make an X on a piece of paper or whatever.
Our elected officials, our political leaders are just like, fuck you. You get nothing. You get nothing. You get nothing. In fact, if you ask for something, I'm going to scold you. If you dare to ask me to do something or threaten to vote for somebody else or not vote for me, I'll fucking scream at you. I'll spit on you if you do that. That's how democratic our system is. When you ask for too much and then you lose, then they blame you because you were all asking for stuff. You're not supposed to do that. You put us in this really weird position by asking for basic necessities. How dare you? Now the really bad guys are winning. I hope you're happy. I hope you're happy for what you've done here. That's our democratic accountability. Nothing says in touch with the masses like Dianne Feinstein getting the Weekend at Bernie's treatment from Nancy Pelosi's daughter. It's funny because you say that as well and it sounds made up, but it's really not. That's really something that has been happening. Like that sounds like a ridiculous like Rob Reiner political comedy, but it's not. It's real life. It's really this is a powerful person in the U.S. Senate. It was just on a bunch of important committees. I always remember Pelosi lipping into those kids. Or Feinstein. Feinstein in 2020, I believe it was. Or like I think maybe after the midterms in 2018. When people were, like young people, were going to see Dianne Feinstein and begging and pleading with her to like fight for a robust climate agenda. And she's just like, I know what I'm doing. She literally said the words, I know what I'm doing. And now it's like, she literally, not only does she not helping those people, she literally doesn't know what she's doing. She has no idea what the hell's going on. She thought you were talking to the chimney sweeps. Yeah. She can't even remember what she had for lunch. Pathetic. This is what passes for democratic representation. And these are the progressives. If you've seen the progressives, wait till you hear about the reactionaries. No, this is a really great and democratic system, though. I love it. We should definitely continue lecturing China and lecturing everyone around the world about our wonderful democratic traditions. What a joke.
This is something that involves people in their political lives, on a daily basis, really.
And folks, listen, I don't think I can get through the whole video. I got started late today. I got about another 30 minutes, a little over 30 minutes to go. Folks, I'm at 2 subs out of 35 today. I know it's going to be not as longer, the stream. It's not as long. I get that. I got a late start. But if you want to help build my productive forces, if you want to support this stream, if you want to build the TRRS productive forces, every little bit helps. And I really appreciate every single one of the very generous chatters that are able to subscribe to TRRS and support this content and support the community and support the work that I do here. Every little bit helps. It is $5 per month to subscribe to TRRS. You can join the community. You can help keep this show on the air. You can support the content that I make, and you get a bunch of the very best emotes on this entire platform when you subscribe to TRRS. It's $5 per month to do so. It's completely free of charge with an Amazon Prime account, which you can very easily convert into a Twitch Prime sub. There's a number of other ways to donate as well. Every little bit, though, really does help, and I really do appreciate it a lot. And of course, our most generous community members who gift 5 subs and above instantly rocket right up to the very top of the Friendship Triangle, Twitch's only 2-dimensional triangle-shaped friendship access and trickle-down clout tiered reward system. It's the only such community that exists on this entire platform. And when you gift 5 subs or above, instantly rocket right through the base level, through the chaos zone, right into that elite tier. So, if you can, again, I got about another 30 minutes to go here today. If you can, please support TRRS and support the work that I do here on twitch.tv/RobRousseau every single day by subscribing, gifting subs, or contributing to keep this show on the air. Thank you. That's my pitch. That's my pitch for subs. Which I imagine they're all just kind of like the pipes are probably blocked. The tubes that deliver the subs to the stream are probably just blocked right now. So I'm just going to wait a few moments for the log jam to resolve
You've
itself.
Just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Gen X Bushy, thank you so much. Gen X Bushy, truly one of the elite members of this community.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
I really, really appreciate the 5 gifted subs and all the support, Gen X Bushy. And thank you as well to J Venture. J Venture, my goodness. Thank you for the 5 gifted subs. That's so generous of you. And Jay, relatively new community member, instantly, as I described, rockets right up to the very, very top of the Friendship Triangle, right up to that elite tier of the Friendship Triangle. I'm relatively new here. Are you affiliated with any tendency, ML, or trots? Well, I'm definitely not a trot. In fact, I think if you look around, if you're on the left in the West and you look around, you realize that you're kind of surrounded by trots, which is kind of an uncomfortable feeling. I don't belong to any revolutionary parties. So I'm kind of cagey about that kind of thing. I think I'm sympathetic to Marxism-Leninism. You see, I've got my man Lenin right behind me, the Soviet-era statue right there. You know, like I talked about, the framework of dialectical and historical materialism is something that I have found very valuable and something that I try to apply to these conversations about geopolitics or whatever else. So that's probably as close as I could come to describing my tendency. Anyway, folks. Yeah, we got a new J. A new J just dropped as well. Thank you again, J Venture, for the 5 gifted subs. That was very kind of you. So are there any other takers, folks? Are any other takers? Are there any other brave heroes that can step up in this moment and support this content and support the community and support the work that I do here on Twitch? Going on 3 years. After this summer, it's going to be 3 years that I've been doing TRRS.
You can count on me. You're gonna
which
have
is really hard to
Rob
believe.
To talk you through all this.
Anonymous Gifter, thank you very much for the gifted sub as well. Thank you to our beautiful Christ-like anonymous gifter. It's really hard to believe that I've been doing. I was really like in 2020, I guess October, November 2020, I started doing this stream. During COVID, because of the COVID benefit that I had in Canada, I was able to put some money aside and buy and revamp this computer and get a bunch of new parts from my computer tower and start this stream. And I kind of was just like, oh, I'll give this streaming thing a try. Just one day, I just turned it on, and then it's like, and 3 years have gone by, and it's like, whoa, what? I went into this like fugue state for 3 straight years where I just showed up every goddamn day to talk about this stuff. And here I am. Here I am in June 2023. You know what? I'm going to be here next year as well. I'm going to be here in June 2024 and June 2025 and June 2030 and June 2040. When I'm an old man in our collapsing civilization I'll be dancing for schlubs. For your amusement. I'm not fucking leaving. And they'll all be just like 1984. That's right. It's going to continue to be 1984. Even if you assume that civilization will survive. Well, that's when it will, like, this show will become like the aesthetic that I have of this kind of like pirate broadcast kind of 80s dystopia thing. Then it's going to be real. Then I'll just record the show on like some old camcorder and just we'll have like, I can send there's a single VHS tape that I'll pass around to different people. That's what it's going to be. How are you not without a single cent from Moscow or Beijing? That I don't know.
Rob to talk you through all this.
Sikalufakis, thank you very much for the 18 months of Prime. Very much appreciated. Radio Rib sending out messages of hope to the comrades. That's what I do. That's what this show is. You know, that's what this show is. We all, if we live here in America or Canada, you feel sometimes, especially if you have these kind of values, you feel pretty alone, don't you? You feel pretty isolated. You feel pretty alienated. But you know what? When you click on the little button on twitch.tv, the little button that says TRRS, and all of a sudden you're connected with people, and you don't feel so alone, and you feel like you have a community, and you feel like you have friendship. And we do have friendship, and it's real. It's real. It's not parasocial, it's real. You know? And that's priceless. That's priceless. Not only is that worth $5 per month, or the odd sub gift, but it's priceless. You know? Not a lot of people get to have access to those wonderful things for that little investment. You know? You go to therapy, that's a big thing. That's a big deal. You go on vacation or whatever, do all these things, that's big, that's complicated, that's big. This, you just press the little button. Press the little button on your phone, and then I'm here. I'm here with you. We're together. We're all together. Me and you. That's right, you. I'm talking to you specifically right now. And you know who I'm talking about. Let's get back to the video. Let's see if I can put a little bit more of a dent into this video.
There's challenges for that in China. One of the great modern Chinese
Thank
thinkers,
you for everyone who
Min
supports
Wang Hui, wrote
this
a book a few
community and
years ago
supports
called
the stream.
Depoliticized Politics, in which he lays out the case that for many people in China, they're very happy with the way things are going. They're very satisfied with their lives. They kind of want to get along with their own, day-to-day activities. And there's been kind of
Makes
for many
sense.
people, there's a certain level of political disengagement. I think one of the things that's been very inspiring under Xi Jinping is the effort to encourage re-engagement, to get more people involved. But that's a broad and ongoing challenge that China faces. But when we think about politics, we think about political
gotta
life,
go.
we think about democracy in China. We can't just look at it and say,
I've
well,
gotta
they
go
don't
to
have a
China.
two-party system and elections that take place every 2, 4, 6 years, so it can't really be democracy. That's just ludicrous. We need, again, to take China seriously as its own place with its own history and its own, contemporary realities.
Every revolution faces the danger of counter-revolution. It's a given. That's always been true, not just with socialist revolutions, but the French Revolution, revolutions everywhere. It's always this tussle, a struggle, and it goes on and on between revolution and counter-revolution. And you can, as historical materialists, find and identify the different social and political forces in society who are pro-revolution and those that are pro-counter-revolution. So this struggle is not going away. It's not going to go away tomorrow. It's not going to go away next year. It's going to keep going.
No, having
And there are
politically
forces
conscious
of
populations,
counter-revolution
authoritarian
globally.
brainwashing.
And I mean in particular U.S. imperialism and Western imperialism, which is promoting counter-revolution. And they're promoting what they call regime change. But it's really, in the case of China, it would be counter-revolution, to get rid of the rule of the Communist Party of China. Now, one of the one of the things that I think, one of the chapters in your book, and again, the book is entitled China's Revolution and the Quest for a Socialist Future. People can buy it at 1804books.com, 1804books.com. You can order it. And you're going to be on a nationwide speaking tour starting, I know you'll be speaking in New York on July 1st, talking about the book. So I'm sure people will be eager to come and meet you and, you know, have their book signed, but also participate in discussions. But one of the things that we could see when it comes to the socialist project is that the Soviet Union, which was the first socialist state, and used really far different methods than what the Chinese government employed after 1978, after the opening up. The Soviet government was overthrown by counter-revolution. It started in the mid-1980s. It ended in 1991 with the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And the repercussions for the people in Russia and Ukraine, the Baltics, the Caucasus, the Southern Asian
devastating
republics, and the people of the world has been so profound. The last 30 years has been shaped by counter-revolution. So when we're talking about revolution and counter-revolution, the stakes are big. The stakes are huge. And one of the chapters in your book is entitled Building a New China and the Struggle Between Two Lines, 1949-1975. Now that is the struggle that was led at times by Mao Zedong, the chairman and really leading figure of the Communist Party and of the Chinese Revolution, and the leadership that took over later, in particular Deng Xiaoping. There's two-line struggle. Both sides, and I really want to emphasize this, both sides feared counter-revolution. Both sides recognized that economic development was a key for China because it had to overcome the legacy of the century of humiliation, imperialist penetration, and the attendant poverty. So both sides agreed on the goals. But the question was how to get there. And I think that Mao feared that by opening up, by letting a bourgeoisie grow in China or integrating China into the world economy, the danger of...
This is so central in discussions I have about Cuba, the immediate and constant pressure of counter-revolution. And we see how in the West, how we look at any measures that are taken to protect or defend against counter-revolution, whether it's Cuba or China or the Soviet Union. And that's what we use, even when we're the ones that are trying to instigate the counter-revolution. When any one of these societies takes steps to defend itself from this counter-revolution, it becomes part of our propaganda against them. And we hold up these efforts that they're making to literally block our own destabilization and our own kind of economic warfare or political warfare. And when they take steps to stop that or defend themselves or protect themselves, we say, look at this authoritarian country. Look at how violent and authoritarian they are, you know? And even then you see, like in Cuba, when that SOS Cuba thing was going on and there was that kind of half-assed protest in Cuba, a place where there is poverty and there is problems that people have, like, absolutely. But then, like, you see President Diaz-Canel in Cuba actually get out and go and meet the protesters and talk to them and see what's happening and listen to what they have to say versus like what you see in our society when people protest. You know, or Tiananmen just passed. If you look at Tiananmen as a counter-revolutionary effort that did have foreign backing. I mean, those student protest leaders were doing interviews with Western media and lived comfortable lives in the West after Tiananmen. But when China takes steps to defend itself from this counter-revolutionary effort, 30 years later, we're still talking about it. We're still every single year, remember this massacre. You know, never mind all the dozens of massacres that we've done all over the world since that time. You know, forget about that. We need to talk about this every single year. Every single year. Well, and I think that's disputable, Tiny Panda. I know there were like pro-Maoist elements and people that were opposed to the opening up and the Deng Xiaoping reforms, but I also think it's a little reductive to say that's only what it was. And I think these like student leaders who we've seen interviews with were like right wing. They weren't Maoists. They were putting like Maoist workers in the line of fire because they wanted to provoke this big international incident and they wanted to provoke a violent response. And they were like, we're not going to be there for that, by the way. That's going to be the workers and the people that we've kind of like tried to pull into this movement, you know? And then they put them in harm's way. Anyway, let's continue. I got to go soon.
of counter-revolution would also grow. And Deng Xiaoping's leadership didn't negate the danger of counter-revolution, but made the argument that the gamble was worth it because by integrating China into the world economy, China would get access to all of this Western technology, science, learning. In return, China would give the Western capitalists a very big market, a labor market and a commodity market. And that the Chinese Communist Party was strong enough to be able to manage this sort of walking on this tightrope. I want to make this point because I think some of the communists, some of the Marxists, some of the socialists who are either pro-Mao or pro-Deng make the other side sort of caricature and stereotype the other side's argument. Like Mao was like an adventurist and a populist who didn't care about increasing the means of production, he only cared about mobilizing the masses, and he only cared about socialist consciousness. He didn't care about economic progress.
And you might argue that you have to advance the socialist consciousness before the economic progress comes. There's also been this narrative about Mao and Deng that Mao didn't like Deng as well, or Mao suggests this idea that Deng somehow like got into power against Mao's wishes or anything. There's some amazing stuff written about their relationship, though, you know? And Mao actually had this huge respect and admiration for Deng. It's very similar to the Stalin and Lenin thing, absolutely, because it allows people to, coming from this kind of like academic ultra-leftist position, are able to kind of form this wedge and say like, oh, I supported it before, but now I don't. Now I can't anymore because there's this split that's happened. It allows you to kind of maintain a sense of sort of credibility while denouncing this official enemy state. Yeah, I was skeptical. I mean, a lot of people, right, have come around on this. I was skeptical as fuck as Deng until recently, but now it makes so much sense. I mean, again, the proof is in the proof is in the success. Like you see what China looked like in 1980 and what it looks like now, right? In terms of the infrastructure development and all the amazing things that have happened. You see this line, the reduction of poverty starting in 1980. And it's kind of like, you know, you gotta kind of hand it to him. Okay, so Tiny Panda, you're like a China bad person? Is that what you're doing? Is that what you're doing in the chat? I mean, yeah, I think when your society is led by a socialist party, the Communist Party of China, and it's eliminating extreme poverty, investing in infrastructure, investing in this kind of internationalism, the Belt and Road Initiative, developing other nations, developing alternative economic systems to the imperialist system. Yeah, I think that actually is very socialist. You know? Oh, I'm a Mao. Tiny Panda, where do you live? Can I ask that? Where do you live? Tiny Panda, where do you live? Are you in like the United States? You don't need to know your address. In Ontario. Okay, so you live in Ontario, Canada. You're a Maoist from Ontario, Canada, and you feel comfortable saying that China, this country that's become this global powerhouse that's led by a party that has 90 million members, a communist party with 90 million members, and you know more about socialism than these 90 million Chinese people that are part of the Chinese Communist Party that are engaged in building this project? That's your position on this, I guess? Do you think that's maybe a little bit arrogant? Do you think that's maybe a little bit chauvinistic? To live in fucking Canada, of all places, where we've never had a revolution? Where we've never fucking organized anything for decades? Do you think maybe it's a little chauvinistic to be lecturing China about what socialism is and is not? Do you think that's maybe a little weird? And again, it's anti-materialist. When you take a look at this country, if you're a Maoist, I mean, you look at what happened in, like, You look at China in the 70s, after the Cultural Revolution and after all these things, which had a number of successes. It increased literacy. You know, there was a number of good things that happened during this period, but also there was a lot of mistakes and a lot of terrible things that happened. This is still a country at the end of Mao's period, incredibly poor, still like zero productive capacity, zero industry. And out of that, you know, after this period as well, after World War II, they lost 20 million people. And going from that to now becoming this like burgeoning global superpower, this economic superpower, providing this totally alternative path for development that hasn't existed for third world countries or global south countries in decades, eliminating extreme poverty in their country, building these vast, incredible, historic infrastructure projects. And you, from your home in Ontario, say, no, no, thank you. No, thank you. This is bad to me, actually. I know more about this. Me, Tiny Panda, the Maoist from Ontario, Canada, know a little bit more about socialism than, you know, Deng Xiaoping or Xi Jinping or these, again, 90 million members of the Communist Party of China. Doesn't that like seem weird to you? Do you ever stop and think about how that's maybe a little fucked up? Anyway, I'm going to go now because I have to go pick up my kid from school soon. Let's put a pin in this for today. We can watch the rest of that video tomorrow. We can watch part 2 tomorrow. You know, as you know, I always enjoy talking about this subject and learning about it. It was a shorter stream today. I got started late, which I apologize for. But I'm going to go now. I'm going to go now. This has been a very nice discussion. I've enjoyed hanging out with you all. Some of you I've enjoyed hanging out with. And I would just like to make one final plea. One final plea for anyone out there. Any potential community member.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
That wants to support TRRS like our wonderful comrade, Diego. Thank you very much, Diego, for the gifted sub and for all the extremely generous support. And if anyone else would like to subscribe to TRRS and support the work that I do on here.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
No wonder your panda is so tiny.
Thank you, Matt, for the 200 friend coin.
You can count on me. You're going to have
and thank
good
you,
old
Diego,
Rob
as well.
to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Diego, for another gifted sub. I really, really appreciate all the support, Diego. Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. I'm trying to just look through my bookmarks because I had seen a really cool thread of different stories about. Oh, here it is. Look. You know what? I got another 5 minutes. Let's just take a brief look at this. Let's take a brief look at this. The supposed irreconcilable division between Mao and Deng is a lie pushed by factionalists that only serves to divide communists. The fact is that Mao saw Deng as an extremely important and valuable comrade and party leader, even late into his life. In November 1957, Mao took Deng along with him to Moscow for the celebration of the 40th anniversary of the October Revolution. He introduced him to Khrushchev with these words, "See that little fellow over there? He's a very wise man, sees far into the future." Then he pulled out all the stops, praising Deng as the future leader of China and its Communist Party. These are Mao's own words. "This is the future leader," he said. "He's the best of my comrades in arms, a great growing force. This is a man who's both principled and flexible, a rare talent." Khrushchev himself had taken note of Deng a year earlier. "Yes," he agreed, "I also felt that this is an impressive person." Mao needed a person who was no less pragmatic than Zhu to replace the ailing premier, and Deng, who had demonstrated his devotion, was just such a person. In October 4th, 1974, Mao informed Wang Hongweng of his desire to make Deng the first deputy premier, who would discharge the duties of the premier. Days later, he ordered the inseparable Wang Hairong and Tang Wensheng, his grandniece and English language interpreter respectively, to tell the Politburo that he had decided to appoint Deng as deputy chair of the Central Military Commission and chief of the general staff of the PLA. Promotions for Deng. The first clear hint that Mao intended to give Deng even more responsibilities came on April 18th, 1975, when Mao invited Deng to join his meeting with Kim Il-sung. Mao said to Kim, "This is 1975. I won't speak to you about political matters. I'll let him talk to you about that. That person is named Deng Xiaoping. He can wage war. He can oppose revisionism. Red Guards attacked him, but now there are no problems. At that time he was knocked down for some years, but now he is back again. We need him. We need him," says Mao. But again, I'm sure that Maoists from Ontario, Canada probably know more about it than that. So, boy, is there egg on my face. Boy, is there egg on my face. Don't pretend that you know more about this when you live in Ontario, Canada. I'm sorry. It's chauvinistic. It is. We should be learning from this process. We can and should take a look at this amazing development that's happened in China, and we should be thrilled and excited by it, and we should try and learn from it instead of wagging our fingers and lecturing Chinese people about that they're doing socialism wrong. You're doing socialism wrong. How do I know? Well, I don't know. I used to be a member of the Communist Party of Canada until it totally fucking spiraled into irrelevance even further. And now I'm in Ontario, Canada.
Good old Rob to talk you through
now,
this.
now I'm in Ontario, Canada, deciding what does and does not count as socialism. Come on. Red Wizard, thank you very much. Thank you for the gifted sub, Red Wizard. I really appreciate it. And thanks again, folks. That's what I call a productive force. Well, that's, as always, I rely on the chat and the community members here to build my productive forces. And people are very, very generous, and it really means a lot to me that there's a community of people out there that support the work that I do on here and that appreciate this community and this content and allow me to keep the show on the air with their very generous contributions. Scientific socialism is when you live in the heart of empire and you don't stand in solidarity with the world's largest socialist project at a time when it's under this constant propaganda threat from imperialist forces. And you, instead of fighting back against that, contribute to it. But from this ultra leftist, holier than thou vantage point. That's what real scientific socialism is. Real socialism only exists in Ontario, Canada. Or have a revolution on Ontario. How about that? And then we'll talk.